Hello and welcome. I'm Leigh-Ann Gerrans and you're watching W News Extra, broadcasting live from the Arabiya studios. These are our top stories. Ukraine's President Zelenskyy is holding peace plan talks in London with EU leaders as Trump claims he hasn't read the proposals. Syrian President Ahmed al-Sharaa urges civilians to work together to rebuild their country a year after former ruler Bashar al-Assad was ousted. And Hollywood's award season kicks off as the nominees of next year's Golden Globes are announced. Ukraine's President Zelenskyy is in London today, holding talks with EU leaders, including British Prime Minister Keir Starmer, French President Emmanuel Macron and German Chancellor Friedrich Merz. They discussed the latest peace plan that was drafted alongside US officials last week. Ahead of the talks, Keir Starmer said that we stand with Ukraine. Last night, President Trump claimed Zelenskyy hadn't read the proposal yet. Take a listen.
A little bit disappointed that President Zelenskyy hasn't yet read the proposal. That was as of a few hours ago. His people love it, but he hasn't. Russia's fine with it. Russia, I guess, would rather have the whole country when you think of it. But Russia is, I believe, fine with it, but I'm not sure that Zelenskyy is fine with it. His people love it, but he hasn't read it.
To discuss this and all of today's stories, I'm joined by Al-Arabiya senior presenter Rawia Alami and Dubai 92 presenter Jono. Rawia, let's start with you. We just heard from Donald Trump there, but also President Zelenskyy has been in London today, and then he's now travelling to Brussels, so there's lots of shuttle diplomacy happening there. How significant are these talks for moving the peace plan forward, especially after Trump's claim that Zelensky's not even read it?
Well, in theory and symbolically, they should be significant. But in practice, in practical terms, since they ended with no results, I think they don't seem to be that significant. Now, from what we know so far, that at least on the issue of territory, there was no agreement during these meetings, which means that territory remains the most challenging obstacle in this deal. On security guarantees, defense aid, and other issues that were discussed, maybe there were private reassurances were offered by the Europeans to Ukraine. But from a public diplomacy standpoint, it did not come out with anything substantial. I think, though, there are originally limits to European-led diplomacy in whichever case.
It's quite interesting because it almost felt ceremonial today. It almost felt like Zelenskyy arrived in the UK to meet Macron, Merz and Starmer, Jono, as after those talks between the US and Ukraine over the weekend, no significant breakthrough. I don't know what you think. Is this all about just being with your allies, trying to show Donald Trump that you're strong together in the face of Moscow, in the face of Washington, D.C.? That's kind of how it's appearing at the moment.
Well, he needs Europe on side, and Europe has this influence. We know it has an influence, certainly, over the negotiations that are taking place, but it's political leverage more than anything else. It's not really authorship. The plans have been in place. It's a US drafted plan. And Europe is kind of saying, yes, we're okay with this. No, we're not. What we're seeing now is Zelenskyy trying to garner the troops in terms of a European front to try and get more leverage when it comes to coming to the negotiating table. The US has led the draft on this from the get-go. Europe is deeply invested on the ground. Europe has been funding Ukraine and continues to do so. It's been training troops. It's been handling the refugee fallout. Every single country in Europe has been handling that. And that gives leaders like Starmer, like Macron, like Merz, they've got the ability to shape the red lines that we're hearing so much about. They've been brandished about so much, particularly around the sovereignty, particularly around security guarantees, because as we know from the US's point of view, that will fall to Europe. So that's where Europe comes into play here and has the influence and has somewhat of a bargaining chip. What they can't do certainly at this stage, is ignore Washington's weight and ignore Washington's requests. So it's less about rewriting the plan. That's not going to happen. The 19-point plan is there in place. It's more about preventing a deal that Europe and Ukraine can't live with more than anything else. So it's about finding the common ground and saying, right, this is where we are and this is where we'd like to be. And I think that's what we're seeing right now. The longer that Zelenskyy holds tough on not giving Trump a response in this, I think the more likely Donald Trump, who doesn't really deal very well when he kind of gets put on the back foot, he's likely to not take that really in a favourable light. So I think it's in Zelenskyy's best interest to get the troops together, i.e. in the form of Macron and of Starmer and of Merz, and say, right, here's the united front of Europe and here's what we think we want in terms of a deal, and then come back to the negotiating table if that's the case. That's what I think we're seeing right now.
What I find interesting, Rawia, is we haven't really heard from Russia, have we? Russia haven't said what they like about the peace plan, if they're even going to agree to it, what they're willing to concede. None of us actually really know what this looks like. So we're all talking about it, but we're not actually 100% sure about anything. And it's quite a difficult position for analysts to be in and people on the ground, because it's that insecurity of what is this plan? It's changed so many times. Is Moscow looking at the same plan as Kyiv is?
Especially, yeah, you're right. Especially after Witkoff and Jared Kushner went to Moscow to discuss the plan with Putin, and then we didn't really hear much after that about the details. And in fact, this is why the Ukrainian delegation has went back, met again on Saturday in Miami with the Americans so that they can brief them on what happened in Moscow. Now, the thing is, we heard it from President Trump that the Russians are okay with it, with the plan. That's what he said.
And we haven't heard that before.
We haven't heard that before. But also we're hearing that the Zelensky's people, as President Trump called them, his team, they love the plan. But Zelenskyy hasn't really read the proposal yet. So we're getting a lot of mixed signals as to exactly what has this plan come down to now that it's 19 points. Who is agreeing on what? Exactly. And even we haven't heard from Russia about what they refuse to, from this plan.
Yeah, it's sort of fascinating, isn't it? Because we've been talking about a long time, but not 100% knowing the details of the plan. I think it's really interesting because I spoke to a couple of analysts in my earlier show, and both of them actually came out and said the same thing to me. They said Putin and Russia are continuing this war because they have the men to do it. They have the men to send to the front lines to fight. They basically have the bodies. And the problem is Ukraine is running out of that, and they don't have that at the moment. So even though we're hearing about drone warfare, electronic warfare, it still comes down to that face-to-face combat on the battlefield that wins you territory.
Yeah, it's size of population.
Population, the army strength, but also financially. Ukraine are not in a position to continue this war indefinitely, funded by Europe. Now, there was a British government source who'd said earlier today that the leaders of certain countries in Europe have discussed using those frozen Russian assets that we've heard a lot about as well in the last couple of months to fund the Ukrainian effort. And we've seen Estonia, Finland, Ireland, Latvia, Lithuania, Poland and Sweden say, listen, EU, perk up and get the cash out there. Use those frozen assets quicker, sooner rather than later, to finance Ukraine and their war efforts. And I think the simple reason is, I've listed countries, Spain's not in there, but it should be in terms of financial viability. They simply cannot afford to continue giving aid.
And the problem is Belgium do not want to release these frozen funds to Ukraine because it's very difficult to do it legally. So they're saying that they arguably need a loophole to do this. That money does belong to Russia. So once again, we're seeing the Europeans just not united when they need to be right now behind Ukraine.
But it's costing them so much money. I mean, this is a rough estimate from last year, 177 billion in combined financial, military and humanitarian funds to Ukraine. By comparison, the Gaza war effort has garnered 450 million in humanitarian aid to Gaza since 2023. So it is a stark contrast when you look at it like that. How long really can Europe afford to bankroll this effort? And I think Zelenskyy is dragging his heels a little bit on this. To say he hasn't read the plan, I feel perhaps it's certainly he's had a glance, for sure.
I think he's trying to gain time
at
this stage so that he doesn't say no to Trump, as you said, because President Trump is not going to take it very
No's
well.
don't go well.
Yeah, but definitely we have to also bear in mind that the European military aid to Ukraine has gone down almost 57% since the beginning of this year. So in comparison, the second part of this year, it's almost half of what Ukraine was getting at the beginning of the year. And if we want to talk about how long Europe can maintain this, you're absolutely right. I mean, there are countries, not just the countries that you mentioned, but other major countries in Europe that are struggling with costs and budgets and also with public outrage, that the money that is needed to be funneled internally, locally and domestically is being sent to Ukraine. So I don't think that is very sustainable for a long time.
Yeah, it's a super interesting conversation, and I think a lot of analysts are now asking how long Europe will really keep funding Ukraine. But thanks so much for your thoughts there. Let's move on to another story now. And Syrian President Ahmed al-Sharaa has urged civilians to work together to rebuild their country as they mark a year since the ousting of ruler Bashar al-Assad. Al-Sharaa led an alliance that took the capital Damascus this time last year after nearly 14 years of war, putting an end to more than 5 decades of the al-Assad's family rule. Jono, let's start with you, because I think everyone watching the show and ourselves will remember that very moment that the Assad regime fell. It seemed to happen very quickly. But what does Syria, the first year after al-Assad was gone, tell us about the country's path towards recovery, stability and a future? Well,
what we know from this is that ending the regime was the easy part of this entire process. We've got a country that's faced 14 years of civil war. The real test is rebuilding the country after that. Symbolically, the first year matters hugely because it's that unity messaging, it's the celebrations that we're seeing all over our screens today, and it's that very clear break from Assad's rule that we're witnessing taking place. But the practical part behind Syria's rebuild is now what follows, and that is enormous, and I don't think you can really take that challenge lightly. There is the economic collapse, the damaged infrastructure that's there on ground, displaced populations. There's everything that goes along with that, the militias that are still there, that hold real power in Syria. All of that is a follow-on. That would be the real test of al-Sharaa and his true power as de facto president, because, of course, he's not currently elected, and we're probably 4 years away from a presidential election. Even though we've just had government elections there, we're 4 or 5 years away from any presidential election. So stability really depends on al-Sharaa and how he can translate that battlefield alliances, and even those somewhat soft power alliances that he used when he went to the US, that he can use those into real civilian governance and bring international legitimacy to Syria and to a real government that actually can work for the people of Syria. But it's still a hugely symbolic day for them.
It is hugely symbolic, and there are, as you do say, still sectarian violence that we're seeing in Syria. No rebuilding has happened this year on. I know it's very early to say, Rawia, but no reconstruction started. And obviously we saw al-Sharaa in the White House, and that was, of course, that was last month. He's built a bond with Donald Trump. We are aware the West support al-Sharaa, but that doesn't stop the fact that most Syrians are still living in dire poverty. The buildings are crumbling. There's no constitution in place. But do they still see this as a moment to celebrate?
Absolutely. I mean, I think it's evident from the footage. If you look at the celebrations, the crowds that filled the streets in Damascus and in different Syrian cities, the squares that were filled with people, I think it is very telling as to how happy and what a joyous occasion this is. We have to remember that we're talking about people who have gone through civil war for 14 years, people who have endured a dictatorship, and one of the worst probably in recent histories, also for decades. So this is a dream. They're still in the euphoria of their dream come true. And it is true that no reconstruction happened in the past year, but I mean, there have been some significant achievements. First of all, the lifting of the sanctions, trying to revive the country economically at least, or jumpstart it. They had to deal with a lot of sectarian violence in different areas, from Druze, from Alawites. They had to deal also with Israel, having reoccupied parts of the of Syria near the border. There are a lot of challenges. I think the Syrian people still have, they do understand that these things take time. They do understand also from lessons of history what happened in Iraq, in Tunisia, in Egypt. After the Arab Spring, there is a price to pay for that, which is some period of chaos. I think they're doing well. I think they have the support of the Arab world and major players in the Arab world. They have the support of the Americans as well. And I think, you know, it can be pushed and things will happen. And I think Syrian people, they still have the patience to wait it out and see it through.
I think what's impressive with this as well, like you said, they not only have the support, but I think al-Sharaa on a world stage has hedged his bets in the right place with places like Saudi Arabia, UAE, Egypt, Washington. He's playing that out because the main aim of the game here will be a return inward investment into Syria's economy, which I think is what's next. We've heard the pledges already. Once that comes in, then the rebuilding can start. So he's doing the right thing on an international stage. And then I think at grassroots level, there's a lot more work to be done, which is what's going to take a little bit of time. And I think he's fully aware of that.
And I don't think that was ever in doubt, because I was actually just thinking when we were talking about Syria, I do remember those absolutely traumatizing images that came out of Syria during that brutal civil war and how people really suffered and what really happened in the country. So actually seeing people out on the streets today is such...
It's an emotional. It's an emotional moment, even for non-Syrians.
Do you remember
for Arabs as well?
And I remember just watching the bombardment of the cities of Syria, how difficult it was for those people, and now it just feels like a weight has been lifted, but there's still work to happen. And Saudi Arabia also. Tell us a little bit about the gift.
Yes, actually, this is really, really significant. Mohammed bin Salman, the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia, apparently has gifted al-Sharaa a piece of the cover of Al-Kaaba. Al-Kaaba is the holiest, most holiest place, location in Islam. It's where all Muslims go to do the pilgrimage. It's the square building that is covered in black. So the cover of it is called Al-Kiswa, and it is very significant, and it has it has almost a sacred status in Islam. Apparently he has gifted him a piece of it in February when he did his first out-of-state visit after he took power. But he didn't announce it, and he kept it for the special occasion of celebrating the first year anniversary of the overthrowing of al-Assad. It's now on display, as you can see, in the Umayyad mosque, the historic mosque, and it's very significant because the Saudis don't just give such gifts casually, something that is so holy, so religiously important and significant. They don't give it out casually. Usually when they do, it is to either, it's like an affirmation. It's like it's a recognition of the authority of the person this gift has been given to. Legitimizing. It deepens also the alliance, and it cultivates loyalty, and partnership. So this is the significance and the symbolism behind this gift.
Jono, quickly, we're running out of time, but I want you to quickly talk to me. We know Bashar al-Assad is currently in Moscow. There's been a leak. What's happening? The
leak in the video is in poor quality audio. You can hear him say that Putin looks a little bit puffy right now, and he's had a lot of surgeries. That is a loose translation of what was said. However, what I think this is probably good from an international point of view. It means there may be some fractions and some cracks perhaps in that Moscow Damascus alliance that we've seen for quite some time. So that may be a good thing, because we do know, of course, there's a military base that's there as well. Russia has relied on Syria for strategic footholds in the Middle East. Now that military base that's in Tartus is still there, but there's an air base as well. That huge strategic asset that Moscow have is not necessarily in jeopardy, but it means that Syria has firmly put its foot and said, right, Washington's the side that we want to be on. I think that's probably a wise choice. And it kind of removes, as Russia is so distracted, as we mentioned, with Ukraine right now, that's draining money and manpower. Damascus is the last thing on their list. So I think it's distracted away from that for a little while. This might be something which comes back to bite him. I don't think it is, but it may be something he has to answer for. But for now, it seems to solidify where his allegiances lie.
Very interesting. Thank you so much for your thoughts on that. Let's move on to another story now. And an 88-year-old US Army veteran who spent years working full-time at a grocery store to make ends meet is finally getting a break. Ed Bambas went viral after Australian influencer Samuel Weidenhofer shared his story online, highlighting his financial struggles and also personal losses. The influencer set up a GoFundMe campaign that raised over $1.7 million, allowing Bambas to retire. Rawia, this story went viral online. I don't know, most of us might have seen it, but how this particular story about Ed Bambas, you know, how hard is it for seniors in America who do wish and dream of retiring, like we're always told we finally would?
Yeah, well, it's becoming increasingly hard to retire in the US. First of all, the costs are rising much faster than income. So seniors are having to face, you know, very high prices in housing, food, utilities, medical care. And at the same time, their social security is not rising that much. It's rising very modestly, not sort of in relation to the rising costs, which means that you know, seniors end up with no social security or hardly enough. Basically, they're getting, social security is the only means of income, and I think they pay around maximum $1,900 a month, which is barely enough to survive anywhere in the US. That's number one. Number two is Americans are living longer, yet they are living less healthy. So they are, you know, they're living longer, yet they have more extensive medical bills, more expensive, you know, also consistent care, assisted living, all of these things. And they're living with chronic illnesses that need, you know, you need to throw money at it all the time. And also their social security or their pensions or Medicare, let's say, it does not cover any assisted living for these pensioners. And also we should not forget that, you know, most traditional pensions have been, they have stopped, and now they have been replaced with the 401ks.
And in his case, in Ed's case, he actually worked for General Motors and the company went bankrupt, so he lost his pension. And that's also something that happened. And obviously, if you lose your pension and you also lose your medical insurance, so it was like a whole state of things that had happened to him, a chain of events. And he was making ends meet working at this grocery store. But Jono, I saw the video online and it's so emotional because this lovely man, Ed, is doing 8 hours a day at the grocery store. He's making up the money where he can to be a little bit more comfortable. But should we be comfortable with influencers and viral videos stepping in to help people like Ed? Or is this a sign that basically, as Rawia was explaining, the system's just broken?
So I think from both sides on this, on one hand, you see this wonderful public response to a genuinely moving story, and it shows that human generosity still shines through, and I guess that does restore your faith in humanity somewhat. But the uncomfortable truth is that no 88-year-old should be working in a grocery store to make ends meet, and certainly shouldn't need a TikTok or a GoFundMe page to retire with dignity, having given 88 years of your life already to the working system. So that viral kindness kind of becomes a safety net. And what it then does as a chain reaction of events is highlights the systematic failures of everything from pensions, from healthcare, from elderly support, I think, in the Western world in general.
It's terrible.
Really is something to, they'll do studies on this and say, how did we get this so wrong? Influencers can help individuals, and it's wonderful for Ed. This is a lovely into a story with $1.7 million. He can retire. But what about everybody else? And it's 1 in 5 people who are over the age of 65 are still working. They're still actively working just to make ends meet. And then if you look at the seniors 65 plus who are part-time working, that figure goes up to around almost 40%, just shy of 40%. Full-time employees is at 20%. That is a lot of people over the age of 65 who should be enjoying the prime of their life, retired, relaxing, And there's been systematic failures across the board.
I feel
Undoubtedly.
I feel there's another dimension to this. It's not just a failure of the pension system or the financial, whatever, the social security system in the West. I think also there's a glitch or a problem in the culture as well and in the social system. Let me just do a very simple comparison. You know, in the Arab world, in a lot of the Arab countries, there is, not in the Gulf maybe, but in other Arab countries, there is no social security in some countries, and some countries don't definitely have no pension systems. Okay, so in our culture, our pension fund are our children. Okay, and this, in general, Arab children, you know, they grow up with this cultural idea that, you know, I have to take care of my parents. And therefore, you would find much less old people's homes in the Arab world than what you would find in the West. In fact, in the Arab world, you would find two brothers. Like I read this beautiful story about two Saudi brothers, old men, who went to court and fought over who is going to take care of their elderly mother. And you know, the older son was saying, "I want to continue caring for her," while the younger son is saying, I want to care for her because my older brother is getting old and he cannot. And after, you know, the court ordered that the younger son should take care of her, it's very emotional. So this is, I think, this could be an answer also to the West's problem. It's not just about the social security system, it's about the culture as well.
And then once again, people are passing it off to the government, aren't they? It seems to be something the Western world do, rather than sort of taking a social responsibility for it themselves.
It is hugely expensive as well, and you mentioned care homes. They're hugely expensive.
They're vastly expensive.
Crazy. Money, and pensions will cover the bare minimum when it comes to an elderly care home.
A lot of people have to sell their house.
And that's exactly what they will do, and they'll move into assisted living accommodation, or they'll move into an elderly people's home. But again, that is a Western culture, which is something that I think within the last 40 years, we've seen this flip from where it went, your elderly family will move in to live with you and they'll have their primary care in the homestead of their children. And it's moved from that to let's make it somebody else's problem. And luckily for Ed, at 88 years old, he's got his wits about him. He's well able to get out there and do this work, but he really shouldn't have to, nor should anyone who are in that age of their life. Enjoy, retire. The dimmer years of your life should be spent in convalescence, which I know my dad is a huge fan of, and has been for the last 15 years.
The problem, I think, is going to get worse in the next couple of decades.
Yes, it's just even more expensive, and the longer and longer people do live. But thank you so much for your thoughts on that. Let's move on to another story. Paramount has launched a $108.4 billion hostile bid for Warner Brothers, challenging Netflix, which had reached a $72 billion takeover deal with the company. It comes after President Trump said he will be involved in the deal between Netflix and Warner Brothers Discovery after raising concerns about Netflix's big market share and the firm's combined size, saying it could be a problem. Jono, this has got really juicy and exciting today, hasn't it? Well, so we thought it was all kind of over on Friday. Netflix had won the bid. Okay, great. Now there's a twist.
Well, there is, because Donald Trump's got involved, and you might think, well, why? Why is the President of the United States getting involved? He's a businessman at heart, and that's probably because he can. But what changes that? Paramount's bid is not really just about commercial anymore, it's political. It's a legal minefield as well on top of everything else. But Donald Trump's team and him saying that he might be challenging parts of this deal, particularly around the control of the platform and licensing, this simply stems down to who will Paramount support? Paramount owns CBS, 60 Minutes, that's a personal one. Paramount Plus, MTV, Comedy Central, and a lot of these have taken a pop at the administration or at Donald Trump personally in the past. So mainstream media in general, Donald Trump has viewed it, as we know, as hostile towards him. So any change in ownership raises that big question for Trump and for the team in the White House. Who will the network now support? Who will oppose him? Who will go neutral in this situation? So any change in the media, very Rupert Murdoch-esque, will be something that Donald Trump would like to have his fingers in the pie of. And that's why we're seeing that. That's why this will lead the stories, the bulletins. And as you say, you worry about Netflix controlling the majority of leadership and media in the US. He will look at this and see if this is going to be a takeover, which could potentially hamper his further efforts for a third term.
But this is quite an interesting one, because we have to look at the Paramount Skydance, the bid they've put in, it's a superior alternative to Netflix, delivering more cash upfront to shareholders. So Paramount will offer $30 per share. Netflix will offer $27.5 per share, okay? Now, also, Netflix deals mean that it will take over the streaming services from Warner Brothers, but the Paramount deal, they'll take it all over, which is really interesting. So when we look at it, Paramount will buy more of Warner Brothers, Netflix will just buy the streaming services. And Trump's son-in-law, Jared Kushner, is among the financial partners Paramount is working with as part of the deal.
And that explains why President
So
Trump...
it's so interesting, right? Because there's lots of different things coming into play here. If we have a look at about it, Donald Trump wants to get involved. Jared Kushner's involved in part of the Paramount funding. And now we've seen this big sort of swoop in, which is going to make it, I think, a bit messy when Paramount do go for this Warner Brothers deal.
It sounds like
because
it
Netflix
will.
has already been given it.
I'm personally happy that Game of Thrones is going to be on Netflix. Personally.
I've never
but
watched
it does. You never watched them?
No, I never watched it. He's never watched it.
I've never watched it either. No.
Yeah.
One episode and I fell asleep.
Well, it's the best TV show in history.
Allegedly.
Allegedly, and not. This is not my
According to Rawia.
Not my opinion, honestly, not my.
But I want to talk to you because some of the Netflix productions actually came up in the Golden Globes. One that I watched, The Beast in Me. Beast in the Beast, is that the name? I always forget the name. But I watched a few of them. Tell us about those
Well, I'll tell you about some of the nominations for the Golden Globes. The most nominated film, apparently, was One Battle After Another. It's by Warner Brothers, and it led with 9 nominations, including Best Motion Picture, musical or comedy. As far as top drama contenders, you have Sentimental Value, which is by Neon, which is an independent production, I think. And Sinners, which is by Warner Brothers. They're strong contenders for Best Motion Picture Drama with 8 or 7 nominations, respectively. And then you have the leading studio by volume. Apparently, the independent studio, Neon, as I said, received the most film nominations, over 21 films. Now, Netflix also has some film nominations. Frankenstein, also K-pop Demon Hunters, and Nouvelle Vague. I haven't watched any of those.
I've watched Frankenstein.
I haven't.
I don't know if you have.
Yeah, I saw.
Yeah, I
saw
watched Frankenstein.
Good movie, but again,
Good
I think
movie.
Netflix is what's the Grammys. What makes them, the Golden Globes, what makes them different is that they're a bit more playful than anything the Oscars will do, and I think the Oscars always tick the boxes for the big spending, big hitting, spectacle type movies, whereas the Golden Globes tend to take into account, like you said, the independent movies,
The
and
more indie stuff.
stuff that's
yeah.
a bit more off-piste more than anything else. So it's historically been a bit more playful than the Oscars, and I think they mix up the prestige with popularity in this, and I think that's why you missed out on things like Wicked getting a nod, because I mean, it's a massive movie and it was 3 hours long, but the whole thing was just tripe, wasn't it? But if you love those big box office movies, when the Oscars come around, it'll be nodded left, right, and centre.
I must say that, I mean, I don't know how you guys feel, but I have not been watching a lot of movies recently, since Netflix, since the streaming trend, since all the series. And I think it's, I mean, I don't know if it's just me, but it feels that sort of we're moving away from movies in general.
I've never
But
watched
nobody goes
movies,
to-
so I'm the worst person to ask.
I mean, who
must
goes
have
to
missed
the
something.
cinema
Well,
now?
nobody. That's what I think.
Yeah, no
Global
one
cinemas
goes
is
to
down
yeah.
80% from pre-COVID levels, and I think we changed our habits and we never got back into
Yeah.
going to the cinema again. And now your Bollywood movies are the big hitters in the box office, but your Hollywood movies, unless they're on streaming services, nobody's really
Yeah.
giving a hoot.
I do think that what is quite interesting, I just think that right now the Golden Globes nominations included podcasts for the first time ever.
Yes,
and
you
I found
say.
that fascinating because, as you say, we're listening to things more. We might not be going to the cinema, but there's been podcasts are such a hit now, and just the amount of people who listen to them. So I thought that there was a podcast category, and my
I
favourite
think about
podcast...
time
It's
they
about
have
time.
such a category.
Call Her Daddy, Leigh-Ann Gerrans' favourite podcast, was nominated. So
Oh, congratulations
yes.
then.
Everyone take a
Hope you
listen
win.
to Call Her Daddy. Now, it's that time of the show where Rawia and Jono have chosen 2 of their quirkiest stories of the day. Rawia, yours is about 2 tiger cubs. They're making history. Can you tell us a bit more?
Yes, 2 Siberian tigers apparently were born in a Moscow zoo, and they were born in August at the Zoo Center for Reproduction for Rare Animal Species. Apparently, oh, they're so cute. They're so cute. The cubs are a male and a female, and they didn't name them yet they refer to them in the zoo as the royal siblings, apparently, as their parents used to live in the wild. Also, in September, they weighed 7 kilograms, but then now, apparently, or last month, they weighed 12 kilograms, so they're doing well. They're growing and, well. And also, for the first 3 months, Shiva, their mother, nursed her cubs, but later, apparently, they began eating raw meat, and they have learned to hunt quail.
Oh, they're so cute.
They're
Look
adorable.
at the little things.
Yeah, it's almost difficult to remember that they'll rip your arms off.
I know.
That's the scary thing about it. And it's also important to remember, Leigh-Ann, I'm just going to do my little plug about zoos here. There are more tigers living in captivity than in the wild. And we'll move on from that because sometimes I feel like, zoos and Leigh-Ann, I like to have my little rant, but I won't tonight. And Jono, we're now moving on from cuddly tiger cubs. And if you want to bring back the Xmas sparkle, oh God, you've got to sit on Santa's lap, do
Well,
you?
that's it. Once you hit the age of 6, once you hit the age of 6, that's when the maximum Christmas joy, and I think if you think back to your childhood, when did you have the maximum excitement for Christmas? It's at the age of 6. After that, it begins to peter off a little bit. And then when you get back into adulthood, once you become parents, 70% of parents say that they once again feel that Christmas magic, and they get to start new Christmas traditions and that joy of the kids coming down to unwrap gifts from Santa Claus on Christmas morning. All of that is back into your life once again.
Yeah.
But there is a way to try and kind of fake it till you make it. If there's no kids in your life, or you're trying to find a way to get that Christmas spark again, or maybe you've got adult kids, the way to bring that Christmas joy back is to go to visit Santa Claus as an adult and to sit on his lap and take a picture. And as someone who I enjoy costume characters, I love a visit to Santa's grotto when there's such an opportunity arises. It does fill me with Christmas joy and also somewhat fear. But I think you need to try and balance out the sparkle to get you into the season.
Does Santa have a six-pack? Lewis, can we choose the Santa's lap?
Good question. I think it depends on Santa.
What's the Santa like? Do you have because I'm not sure about sitting on Santa's lap.
It wouldn't make a difference.
What he looks like.
It wouldn't make a difference. So he's wearing a fake belly, and it doesn't make a difference.
So okay, all right.
But a real Santa, like a proper chubby Santa, that's the one that's going to give you, I think what you're describing is Ozempic Santa.
Yeah, we need
Ozempic Santa
issue. But I think the traditional Santa is what kind of fills you with joy because it feels a bit less threatening than what you described.
And more cushiony as well.
And more cushiony.
Yeah.
Do you think you've lost the Christmas sparkle? I can't remember really being 6, but I do feel like the Christmas magic, you do lose it when you sort of
I think when you find out that Santa's not real, that's when you lose it.
Who told you that?
Is he real?
He's 100%.
It's real, people.
I found that with my
okay
kids,
with
actually.
Everybody,
they
he's
lost it
real. No.
My kids lost it once they found out.
You can't spread speculation like that.
No. I'm sorry.
But
I exposed the secret.
Easter Bunny? No, I'm only kidding. But
Tooth Fairy?
Yeah.
Yeah.
No.
All legit.
All legit.
They're all real.
But it is so true, because, this year, I don't know if you guys have, but I put up my Christmas tree, and it actually felt really nice, and I did feel exciting. It's always a nice time of the year. You feel yourself beginning to unwind. Sometimes it's quite nice to buy presents for other people, and it's an excuse to catch up with people that you haven't seen for a long time.
Well, if you just go and spend a couple of minutes in Santa's grotto, get a little gift off him, you'll feel even more festive.
Are you dressing up as Santa this year?
Absolutely not.
I think it's inviting everyone.
What's really beautiful about Christmas is that it's not just for Christians, basically. It's the entire world kind of celebrates it, and even for Muslims. I mean, we celebrate it in the sense that it's that special time of year, a special season. Everybody gets together. It has something really special, even away from religious anything.
It's the giving season, isn't it?
It is.
Yeah.
It is.
Well, thank you so much to our guests, Al-Arabiya senior presenter Rawia Alami and Dubai 92 presenter Jono Hayes. And that's all from us on W News Extra. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. Of course, follow us on X. G&T will be coming up next with Tom Burgess-Watson. Goodbye and thank you for watching.